This is your World War III update. A sea of red, a red wave, a bloodbath on Wall Street. If only I was a vampire. $3,000 an ounce gold. That's the first time that's ever been seen in human history. We're entering the $3,000 to $4,000 level. You know what that means? This is the barometer of social chaos. What do we get at 1,000 to 2,000? Well, we started a little war. What do we get at 2,000 to 3,000? Well, we started another war. What are we going to get from 3,000 to 4? You do the math, folks. You do the math. This guy warned you about it right here a few weeks ago. Okay, I know there's trolls out there who just... Wait a minute. Oh, no, they're gone. Oh, where are they? Where art thou, trolls? Hang on a second. I think I see one of them. What the hell is he? Is he out there panic buying? Is he out there lamenting on how he derided Nate for all those years? It's okay. I still love you, bro. I still love you. Keep coming back. Keep lurking in the shadows. Now, ceasefire is a no-go. Although the mainstream media and the Russian media, who of course are playing to their own domestic audiences, will try to convince you otherwise. Nothing could be further from the truth. This thing is intractably escalating in the shadows as we speak, as another one of Russia's oil refineries goes up in flames in the Krasnodar region. We also have the U.S. now sending long-range bombs to Ukraine as ATACMS supply dwindles. Now, the title's somewhat deceptive because I believe that these are ground-launched small-diameter bombs and they have a range of about 70 miles. Nonetheless, this all comes on the day when Vladimir Putin locked in nuclear weapons for Belarus. Okay, the French are flying fighter jets around the Baltic Sea. There's been attacks on Crimea, and Trump has removed exemptions for Russia to sell its oil to Europe. So the shit's actually hitting the fan. And all the while, the Polish president wants nuclear warheads moved to their territory, and they're trying to negotiate with the French. And how is this? How is this for symbolism? If you understand the symbolism here of these people getting off this smoky airplane at Denver Airport, then you, my friends, you are legendary. Legendary. Look at this support level on gold. I mean, this was weird how it played out today. I'm telling you guys, you know what? You know what? I'm not a numerological guy. I'm not a conspiracy guy. But I just have a sneaking suspicion that once we cross that 3,300, we're going to get some grand apocalyptic reveal of some sort, okay? There's a reason why they put all of the gold at 33 Liberty Street in New York City. That's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the only Fort Knox vault ever been put on display by the public was vault number 33. Is it all a coincidence that vault number 33 is where the survivors emerge in the show Fallout? And I could go on and on, the year that Jesus died and etc., etc. Amen. Numerology to the end. But hey, you know, it could just be a coincidence. Let's get real. Now, in terms of what's going on with the Russians, okay, I mean, let's just, wait a minute. We got to understand what's happening here. 3,000 to 4,000, the barometer for social. Could you imagine what it's going to be like at 4,000? I heard a financial analyst say the other day that as much as he would like to see his financial investment in gold hit 10,000, that he understands the material reality that awaits should that actually come to pass. Because what that would mean then is that things would be that much worse. Like I said, 1,000 to 2,000, we got one war. 2,000 to 3,000, we got two wars. 3,000 to 4,000, I think we're going to war in the Indo-Pacific, okay? But let's just talk about this. I'm going to make this a quick video because, I mean, what more needs to be said, okay? Vladimir Putin is dissembling in his negotiations with Trump. Essentially, he's like you got two megalomaniacs going at it here, right? And they're both really more concerned about appeasing their own domestic populations because neither want a revolt or civil unrest. So what you have here is Putin doing a masterful negotiation with Trump in that he doesn't outright reject the ceasefire, and he even words it in such a way. These Russians, they're just excellent wordsmiths. They're just excellent linguists in general. I mean, Dmitry Medvedev, say what you will, but he's like a modern day Bukowski of sorts. But Putin basically has agreed without agreeing. He said, well, I agree to the idea of a ceasefire, but there's all these conditions. And so what does that mean? We're right back where we started, which is why the war continues to escalate in the shadows. Trump said what he needed to say to get elected. Do I believe that he had the best of intentions when he said those things and he maybe genuinely thought that he could end the war in 24 hours without understanding all of the nuances and all of the history and the complexity of this conflict and not just reducing it through the prism of a very Western-centric mindset, which should just force other countries to accept terms that are insufficient to them? Well, let's hear exactly what Putin said, then I'll tell you what Ukraine said, then I'll tell you what Trump said. I'm going to tell you why we're back at square one. This thing continues to escalate, and we are closer to nuclear war than ever before, and I'm going to leave it like that. We have Russia's position is as follows. Vladimir Putin believes, given the situation in Kursk, a ceasefire would be beneficial for Ukraine, as without it, they risk being physically blocked and left with only two options, surrender or die. The president also said Ukraine might use the 30 days to continue forced mobilization and replenish its weapon supplies. The cessation of hostilities must lead to long-term peace and a resolution of the root causes of a crisis. So in voicing it in this way, he doesn't reject Trump's proposal. And Trump, once again, actually looks successful, at least for this first phase of the negotiation. In fact, you had it plastered on headlines all over Russian and Western media that Putin agrees to ceasefire. But what does that mean? That doesn't mean accepts. There's a big difference between agrees and accepts. I agree that a ceasefire would be great, but do I accept the terms you're proposing? No. So where does that put us? Square one. We're talking, but we're not making any progress. In fact, things are actually going backwards because Trump has now removed the exemption that would allow the Europeans to buy Russian oil utilizing Western financial system. The cessation of hostilities in Ukraine must lead to a long-term peace and the resolution of the root causes of the crisis. Putin did not rule out discussing a ceasefire in Ukraine with U.S. President Donald Trump, emphasizing that Ukraine should have urged the Americans to call for an end to hostilities based on the situation on the ground. Now, essentially, what Russia is asking for at this period of time in order for a ceasefire is for Ukraine to get out of Kursk. I mean, currently there's a route in that direction anyways, so it's looking like they're encircled, despite the fact that the AFU commander says that everything is just fine. But they also want to make sure that Ukraine doesn't remilitarize and doesn't use the 30 days to simply remilitarize. So they want the suspension of weapons flows throughout whatever 30-day period is brokered, which is nearly impossible to guarantee because you can bring in weapons in secret, and there's a lot of things that the Ukrainians already have at their disposal. One of the other conditions is that they can no longer recruit. Now, things like denazification, these are, Putin could claim a nominal victory in that respect. He could claim that, okay, they got rid of most of the Azov battalion, okay? He could probably even claim, the whole NATO thing, disregard that altogether. That's just a kind of a red herring. It's a superficial demand that is really just there for good measure. Both sides realize that whether they agree that Ukraine doesn't enter NATO now is no guarantee that they're not going to change their mind in a year from now. So that's, basically redundant. The only important thing is that Ukraine can't remilitarize throughout this 30-day ceasefire, which Ukraine absolutely is not going to agree to. Here's Ukraine's position. Ukraine will not go into a frozen conflict. That's what Yermak, the representative of Ukraine, said. And the United States itself is against such a scenario. So they don't want a frozen conflict. They want long-lasting peace, or at least that's what the Ukrainians claim. He emphasized that there will be no Minsk III, and Europe will be party to the peace process. Of course, Europe is trying to hatch a plan to put peacekeepers on the ground in that region, which would be a major no-no, which would be an escalation, a massive escalation, and likely trigger some. And I think that's where things are going to break in this whole thing, right? Now, Zelensky said that Putin is preparing to refuse the ceasefire. Now we have heard all from Russia, very predictable, he says, very manipulative words from Putin in response to the idea of silence on the front. He is actually preparing for a refusal, Zelensky said. Zelensky's office effectively rejected one of Trump's conditions for peace in Ukraine, a refusal to join NATO, which again is just stupid. If they were smart, they would just keep their mouth shut about that one, because that could all happen surreptitiously once things were in motion, okay? Eventually, that would all fall into place. It's really one of the most silly conditions on there, okay? It just makes no sense whatsoever. These are red lines for Ukraine in particular, that there can be no ban or no restrictions on the size of the army. There can be no bans on Ukraine's participation, including in the EU and NATO. So Ukraine is saying it's out of the question that we're not going to rearm. It's out of the question that we're not going to train the army, because that's one of the other conditions that the Russians have. The NATO question was also raised by Yermak, that Russia should not have the right to veto whether or not Ukraine becomes a part of NATO. However, Trump agreed with that one superficial point of contention that is all the buzz, and that's to do with Ukraine joining NATO, which is irrelevant, right? And Trump and Rubio and Walsh are trying to emphasize that with Zelensky, who's supposed to be an actor. He's supposed to know these things. And I think they took him in a back room and they're like, hey, just shut the fuck up. We told you that we're giving you tacit security guarantees and you refused it. We said it in more, that was pretty much obvious to everybody but you, okay? You're the one it should have been obvious to. So we also, of course, have Trump's statements in response to what Putin said. And Trump said the following, okay? The statements are promising, Trump said, but so far it is not enough. Okay, so this is the first time where we start to see a little bit of a divide, a little bit of sign of the real relationship between Russia and the United States, okay? Trump commented on today's words by the Russian president. He said, who will get the power plant? Who will get this? Who will get that? You see, these are not easy questions. However, many of them have already been discussed. Okay, well, they've been discussed for the longest time. There's no way in hell Russia is going to give up the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant to Ukraine ever. In fact, they still want to take the city. They want to take Kherson. They want to create, what's it called, Novorossiya, I believe it's called. That's the kind of the, how can you say, what's the terminology? That would be just a bulwark, a protective buffer zone between the West and Russia. That's what they want to create. And that would extend all the way from Odessa, all the way up through along the Dnieper River, through Kharkov, all the way up to the Belarusian border. That is what they are wanting, okay? So whether or not they're going to get that, I think eventually the Russians are just going to keep on hammering, and they're going to keep trying to stymie and forestall these negotiations so that they continue to make progress on the ground. So Trump has concluded his statements in saying that these statements by Vladimir Putin are promising, but for now this is not enough. If Russia is not ready for compromises, this will be an extremely disappointing option for the entire world. So what does he mean by that? Okay, now remember, they're bringing back all the gold. Okay, the United States knows that it can't fight wars on multiple fronts, so it needs to pass the buck on to the Europeans. And the plan is for Germany to rearm, convert the Volkswagen defunct facilities into tank manufacturing facilities, beat the plowshares into swords, and go to war with the Russians while the United States works in the Indo-Pacific. Okay, so that's basically what's going on. And of course, Iran is ready to blow up. And there you have it. So, I mean, what more is there to say? Everything I've been saying is coming true, unfortunately. And the Taiwanese are currently doing exercises. They're trying to figure out ways to hunt Chinese nuclear submarines. So you see where this is all going, right? A joint group of troops and tactical nuclear weapons has been deployed officially on Belarusian territory, but I thought these were deployed a long time ago, but this has now been reiterated, and perhaps it's just being reiterated. Again, this is just strange to see gold prices just now hovering at $3,000. It's really strange, guys. Very, very strange to see that, okay? I think I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to have a short video. What are we at here? We're only at 16 minutes. Damn. All right, so the trolls are out panic buying, and honestly, I'll leave you on one note. Canadians, I got a customs and duty bill today that made my jaw hit the floor, okay? The reality of tariffs are about to set in, and prices, I immediately took it to the team. I'm like, we're going to have to raise prices as a result of this. If these negotiations flounder right now in the United States with Doug Ford and all the premiers and all the Canadian representatives who are currently meeting with Lutnick in Washington, if those talks fail, even if they're successful, I have a sneaking suspicion that it's going to be bad economically for everybody, at least for the short term, okay? So I would just advise people, once again, if you want to get stuff, get it now. Oil prices are down. That is some way disinflationary to the tune of 0.1% a month. I mean, we're still, in many respects, nearly 100% more expensive on numerous different types of commodities than we were over 5 years ago. I mean, gold is one of those things. Gold has literally went up nearly 100% since COVID, okay? So that's really the real inflation. Just look at gold. Well, what has it done since, prior to the pandemic? What was it, like $1,600-ish? And here we go. We're almost double that now, entering into the 3 to 4K range, and anything can happen. So what we're trying to do right now is fast track our orders. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, you gotta stick it to the US by buying only Canadian stuff. That's just dumb to me. That's not going to resolve anything in the end, and the Liberal Party is just going to continue to leverage that rally around the flag tactic to their own interests so that they can take our guns and eventually put us into a war that we don't want to fight. That's exactly what's going to happen. So I would strongly encourage you, if you want to gear up, if you want to support this channel, you'll notice that I don't do embedded sponsorships. That's because I feel that the best way I can bring value to you is for you to bring value to yourself. Gear up at CanadianPreparedness.com. And hey, go check out that video I released 3 weeks ago. It explains exactly what's happening right now. Okay? And I hate to say but I called it. I called it, and that was as clear as it gets. Okay, I told you. Look at this title. I did not edit this title. Market crash could start in days. Fastest selling in history. Panic when gold hits 3,000. Here we are. Here we are. And them trolls, yeah, they're still at the store. Well, I hope they get their shit together. Thanks for watching, guys. Blah, blah, blah.